So I like this analogy. When I treat patients and I measure their meridians, the biological systems, I tell them about the seesaw, that when something goes up, something on the other end of the seesaw goes down. So you could say one is a yin and one is a yang, and what we generally find with people, and Jill's going to go through this and you're going to workshop this, is that when a person shows us their primary meridian as a yang, then very often it's a yin, which is like the counterbalance on here. So health really is a balance between environmental factors and your resistance. And of course, at the moment with the coronavirus, this is very, very important indeed, isn't it? Is it the resistance of the person which is important here, or is it the environmental factors which is the virus in this particular case? So disease is when resistance goes down and the environmental factors therefore go up. So always think about this as a seesaw. We're familiar with the triad of health, with the three sides, the chemistry, the emotions and the structure, and we know that they all interact, one affects the other, and we know that in the middle, if you like, regulating everything within the human body is the human genome, in other words, the DNA within our nucleuses which run our cells. And around the outside of all this, regulating and holding it all together, are these energy fields, which are called chi in Chinese medicine, or prana in Ayurvedic, or vital energy or vitality, call it whatever you want, which holds the whole thing together. So disease, therefore, is an imbalance. I think we're all agreed in that. And we measure it as kinesiologists and within acupuncture and things as differences between the meridians in the system, and we measure it as one thing going up, one thing going down. So in this case, you've got yang on this end and yin on this one. And we put it in that way because the yang meridians indicate low levels of brain chemicals or neurotransmitters, which of course is very important today. And yin is when you've got high. So every time you have a low serotonin, you potentially could have a high serotonin. Okay? They're like opposite ends of the seesaw here. So in this case, disease would be yang, would be down on this end, and therefore yin. And by the laws of energy, you can't take energy from one place without giving it to somewhere else. So therefore the seesaw goes down on one end and up on the other. And you have to balance the two. You can't just lower the high one, or you can't just raise the low one. You've actually got to create the balance. And therefore the right remedies for a person, whether that's mechanical, emotional, or structural, or chemical, has got to create a balance between the yang and the yin. And we know in muscle testing that there are various muscles associated with the meridians, and therefore those muscles must all become strong of both meridians, both the yin and the yang, to find the effective remedy. So we have this conundrum of what is the cause and what is the effect. So is this the cause and this the effect, or is this the effect and this is the cause? Does it really matter? And the answer is probably does matter to the sequence of examining a patient, but in the end you have to balance both anyway. Now I became interested in the work of Abraham Hoffer when I studied applied kinesiology back in the 1980s. And Abraham Hoffer was one of the founding fathers, as we see, of orthomolecular psychiatry. And a wonderful guy, passed on in 2009, which I think that makes him about 92, 93. So his comments on the cause of emotional problems as a founder of the orthomolecular psychiatry movement. So and this is so applicable to us in every way. I believe that if any person, no matter how ill, can be normal for even 5 minutes, it's possible for them to become normal forever, because those 5 minutes indicate there is no permanent damage. In other words, nothing pathological or irreversible. Ever since I've been treating patients with the optimal doses of nutrition, I have predicted that one day society will recognize that one of the most important factors for maintaining health is the provision of the optimal amount of the basic nutrients needed for each person. Disease is the result of pathological changes in the body, which either prevent it from properly fighting off infections or inhibit it from maintaining its own integrity or health. The origin of disease is not genetic. No genes are bad genes. That's a very interesting comment that he's made there, and we'll come back to that later on, of course. So any genes that are truly bad would destroy the individual before birth. All disease must be due to a defect in the nutrients supplied to that individual. If a person has been well since the age of 60, until the age of 60, it's obvious that genes cannot be blamed for an emergent illness. Very true, really, isn't it? So many of our patients that we treat of chronic illnesses are not too bad with their health until they get to 50, 60, and then they develop these problems. So if they've been okay in their teens and their 20s and their 30s, what is the difference? What is it that makes a person a 60-year-old biochemically as opposed to a 20-year-old? The problem is not in our genes, it is the way we feed our genes. In other words, epigenetically. I predict a future in which simple tests will be available which will advise which nutrients are lacking and how much of each nutrient patients need to regain and maintain their health. That's called applied kinesiology. Muscle testing, that's the test, isn't it? So we know how to do that, to supply which nutrients are lacking and exactly how to measure how much and how often they need it. So he was a man really in our camp long before time. And Dr. Goodhart used to mention about Abraham Hoffer and Humphrey Osmond a lot in his works, particularly as I come back to later on schizophrenia. So a big question before we get into this is how much do we actually absorb of a nutrient when we give it? What we know is if we swallow a capsule of magnesium and it's got, say, 100 milligrams of elemental magnesium, now how much do we actually absorb of that? And it's well known in textbooks that only 30% of dietary magnesium, whether that's in a supplement or whether it's in food, in chlorophyll, is actually absorbed. Some minerals only get absorbed in an acid medium, we know, and some only get absorbed in an alkaline medium. All fat-soluble vitamins only get absorbed when accompanied by a fat or oil in the diet. And how many people just don't realise this? They swallow a tablet or a capsule of vitamin D with a glass of water. And I always tell them it's quicker to throw it over your shoulder than waste time taking a tablet or a capsule with a glass of water with a fat-soluble vitamin. You have to take it with an oil, otherwise it doesn't get absorbed. It's very simple. Every book tells you that. But pharmacists persist in just selling over tablets and capsules of vitamin D, particularly. So coenzymes, those are the activated vitamin Bs and a few other ones, are better absorbed in glycerin, we've found. They will get absorbed in alcohol, but because so many people have issues with alcohol, a lot of herbal medicines are made in glycerin as an alternative to ethanol. And we found that coenzymes, in other words, things like pyridoxal 5-phosphate, are much, much better absorbed when they're diluted and dissolved into glycerin. So putting nutrients into oils, or what we commonly call liposomes, has been shown to maximize the absorption and the delivery inside the cells. Now, if you're not familiar with what a liposome is, it's a phospholipid envelope which surrounds the active ingredient. So we would have the active ingredient in here, and as you'll see, we've got the phospholipid structure, just like our cell membranes, with the double layer here, with the active ingredient inside. So what that allows is the compound in here to pass through the cell membranes, particularly in the gut, and delivered inside the inside the blood, the other side of the intestines. Or, as we'll see later on, you can just rub it on the skin. So it's fantastic for people who don't like the taste or can't swallow capsules and things like that, is you simply pour the magnesium or the vitamin D, whatever it might be, and you just rub it through the skin. Very easy, very easy, particularly with children who might have difficulty swallowing capsules. So here we see the active ingredients in a liposome here, or phospholipid structure, and then passing through the cell membranes. So for the liposome to be effective, the phospholipids are mixed with water and the desired active ingredients. So these are things like phosphatidylcholine, phosphatidylserine, all the compounds that make up our cell membranes. Glycerol, or glycerine, it's the same thing, is added to improve the stability of the product and to enhance the solubility, and most importantly is the absorption of the ingredients. We currently do most of the minerals in liposomal forms like iron, iodine, magnesium, manganese, etc., selenium, methionine, zinc. We do the vitamins, particularly the fat-soluble vitamins like D and K, D and K together, CoQ10, etc., all as liposomes. So these can all be applied on the outside of the skin or swallowed on the spoon. And our current range of coenzymes in glycerine we call linctus products. So as soon as you actually taste it, you say, oh, that's a cough linctus. So if you remember what a cough linctus, it's actually glycerine, really, with the dissolved active ingredients. So it has a really, really sweet taste. Although it's diluted 2/3 with water, 1/3 glycerin, it still tastes, quite sweet. So it's very enjoyable for children and people with a sweet tooth. But it's not sugar. Okay, glycerine is actually made from an oil, from fats. It's not sugar, so it won't do any damage to your teeth and things. But it's interesting flavour because most people say, "Ugh, that's too sweet," and then after I say, "Oh, we'll swap you back to that." "Oh no, I quite like that," and everybody actually likes it because it is that gives it that sweet taste. But it's not sugar, just to emphasise that bit.